No, no, you're doing fine. Anytime I don't have to fill the airspace is good by me. That really works well. Welcome, everyone, to the Ides of March 2026 edition of The Impact, a sustainable CT podcast. For your edification, your enlightenment, and your entertainment, too. I'm Jim Hunt, Communications Director at Sustainable CT, so if you're looking for someone to blame for this podcast, well, you can blame me. But remember, this is never a one-way conversation. We always want to hear from you for our edification and enlightenment. Drop us a note, won't you, to info@sustainablect.org. The Impact is brought to you in part by the Common Sense Fund. The Common Sense Fund supports environmental change through education, policy initiatives, promotion of carbon-free energy sources, and stewardship of our natural resources. The fund promotes action both on the environment and in the arts that is practical, creative, and addresses social needs, and we are oh so glad they do. Visit them at commonsensefund.org. Remember, we can't do what we do without you. We don't have a magical rainbow unicorn money tree, no sir, but you can be a Sustainable CT sponsor. Find out how at sustainablect.org. Our guest today is a great friend of Sustainable CT, Adam Whelchel, Dr. Adam Whelchel of the Nature Conservancy. Adam has been with the TNC since 2006, serving as the Director of Science for that fabulous organization. He has a PhD from the University of Delaware, go fighting blue hens, in plant and soil science and hydrology. He earned his master's at San Francisco State, home of the Gators, in conservation biology, and back in the Stone Age, that's before the internet, he used quill pens and oil lamps to earn a Bachelor of Science from the University of Vermont, where the catamounts once roamed the land. Adam's forte is community resilience building. As he describes it, a unique, anywhere, at any scale, community-driven process to improve community resilience for all hazards today and in the future. He has been a faithful partner of Sustainable CT since we administered our very first certification process back in 2018, providing community resilience workshops to Sustainable CT registered towns seeking to gain certification points under Action 5.4, Assess Climate Vulnerability. We and municipalities all across Connecticut are the beneficiaries of his commitment, and it is an honor to have him with us today. Adam Whelchel, welcome to the Impact. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
Yes, thank you so much, Jim. It's wonderful to be here, and I look forward to our conversation.
Excellent, excellent. How did you get started in this business? And I mean, specifically, what got you interested in working on the municipal resilience issue?
Well, this starts in my childhood. I had the good fortune of growing up in Colebrook, Connecticut, which is up in our northwest corner
Oh,
of
yeah.
our great state of Connecticut. And, it's a rural community with lots of woods, rivers, wildlife, but also a really strong sense of community and caring, which, was the glue that kept us all connected. And so for me, I've never really seen or felt much of a divide between people and natural systems. And so that kind of stuck with me, even though I, went through the educational processes that you mentioned, from wildlife fisheries management to community ecology, plant soil science, et cetera. Some jobs in the private sector and research facilities. But I never lost that connection between people and natural systems. And so when I had the good fortune of getting a job with the Nature Conservancy and being able to move back to Connecticut, where I was raised, and to work on issues related to natural resources in the state of Connecticut, I quickly realized that if you're not working, hand in hand with municipal leaders, decision
Right.
makers, and residents, you're kind of missing the boat. So that's kind of what me got me started on down this path of working with municipalities. And I like to joke and say I'm a highly trained community ecologist that has now become a community psychologist in an armchair sense.
Sure.
But I get this chance to really think about how communities work, how they manage their infrastructure, their societal needs, as well as the natural resources and the environment. So that is what got me going on this thing, and I haven't looked back. I got going like around 2006 or so, and I'm some time in here with this community resilience building process, and I'm still excited. I'm so excited to be able to work with new communities that are new
Right.
to me, and that really are asking for a process to help them become more sustainable, more resilient, more equitable. And I still am hanging on to this marriage between people and nature that goes way back to my childhood in Colebrook.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's lovely. That's right up our alley. Working with, I hear what you say about working with people, the who are in the municipalities, actually on the ground doing the work in these towns. You can have an opinion, you can go out and, shout from rooftops, but actually getting work done and working with these people who are doing the work every day is really the most effective way to approach this, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Okay.
mean, most of our decisions, whether they're land use or policy, are made at the municipal scale.
Yeah.
And we got rid of our county governance structure, I think, back in
Right.
the 70s or 60s, even mid 60, 67, I think it was. And
Yeah.
so we have state level, we have our council of governments, kind of our regional planning, structure. And then we have municipalities. So, these are the folks that are on the front lines dealing
Yeah.
day to day with issues,
Yeah.
whether flooding, heat, those kind of things, but also societal needs and how do we better manage our environment going forward. So yeah, it's totally refreshing to work with people that are, they have to find solutions, so
Well, what's really fascinating to me, off track here a little bit, but you've been doing this for so long, the need for it becomes ever greater. Don't
yeah,
have you found that? Really? I mean,
yeah, yeah, and
the threats
yep.
of coastal flooding and everything, the threats have become larger over the last 20 years.
Yeah, they're not only becoming larger, but they're accelerating in
Yeah.
that, the magnitude of is accelerating, and it's you see it, in rivers flooding, along the coast,
Yeah. And
coastal
drought and all
flooding,
sorts of stuff. Yeah.
drought, etc. It just goes on and on and on. I mean, case in point, what is it, 71 degrees today, and last week it was
Yeah.
a low of -1.
Yeah.
So we have this variability that we all have to deal with, and plus the magnitude and the pace is accelerating. So it's no joke. People have accepted it. 2006, Jim, was like sort of forever ago.
Yeah.
We were still kind of debating stuff and should we do anything? Should we not? Should we wait? And what are 2026 now? And it's not if, it's like, how much and when. And
Right.
we have folks, sending in letters of interest to Sustainable Connecticut, requesting now. We don't have to do much outreach.
We
It's
got
kind of
another one today.
like,
We got another one today for you. We'll be passing it on, no doubt.
yeah. So it's
We
very, yeah,
And that's where my head went too. It's like it's not just the threats have become larger and faster, and but also the awareness of it, the acceptance of the
yeah,
necessity of what you're doing has grown. I mean, I could imagine back in 2006, I was guessing, but correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, well, people were rather skeptical. Do we really need to do this? It's kind of, is it worth my time? La, la, la. But things have things
yeah,
have changed radically since then. The
yep,
awareness, the experience of people. I hate to refer to it as this, but it's almost the silver lining of all the terrible extremes the climate's being put to. People are at least becoming more profoundly aware of that, of what is happening.
yeah. We'll talk about this a little bit, but back then it was all about vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
How are we vulnerable? What's at risk? Mostly infrastructure, people, and property. But these days, when we do community resilience building process or CRB, simply, we talk a lot about strengths. And we talk about strengths because people have been doing stuff and they want
yeah,
to make sure that we're raising up, recognizing, and reinforcing the strengths with actions going forward. So people will recognize it and they're doing stuff.
yeah. Now, how did you get involved with us? Tell
Oh,
me, did Lynn just
yeah.
like knock on your door one day and say, or call you up and say, we need your help with this? How did that happen?
Yes, yes, sort of. You know, it was 2017 is when I first had a chance to, this is when it was a Sustainable Connecticut was Twinkle in somebody's eye. And she invited me to come and have a conversation with the president of Eastern Connecticut State University,
Yeah,
within which the Sustainable Group was housed under Lynn's direction.
yeah,
And we decided, the best path forward was do a joint CRB with Eastern Connecticut State and the town of Wyndham. So we did a joint effort. I had never done one of those before. I'd done a lot of municipalities and academic institutions, but usually on their own. But this was a chance to work together, and it was a way to kind of bring the community together and identify actions and share resources and reduce vulnerabilities and lift up strengths, et cetera. That kind of, I think, put that on everybody's radar in terms of Sustainable Connecticut, and then it was just a natural to connect and go forward. And I'm just so thankful. I have a really deep appreciation of what you all do, and dedicated professionals. And since that time, Jim, we've been able to work with Offer Up CRB through Action 5.4, as you mentioned,
right.
to over 55 municipalities in
Yeah,
Connecticut, and
yeah,
we've got a full slate for the spring, and
pretty
it's
marvelous.
just really wonderful. Yeah, and I think it's a small part that we can do at the Nature Conservancy to help support sustainable Connecticut, and I'm really in love with the model that peer to peer, working together and actually, building a network or a community amongst municipalities in the state of Connecticut. It's so needed, and it provides us to contribute a little piece to what you all do, and then to lift up Connecticut, sustainable Connecticut in the whole context of the sustainable states network. It's really cool. So I'm in it to win it for the long term. So
Yeah. I'm really glad it took off the way it did. That we were able to structure a very effective action around it. One of the things that is the hallmark of what we do is we get a lot of collaboration between municipalities. What we try to emphasize is having a lot of collaborative effort and having towns, when they succeed, a lot of other towns will look at this and go, "Oh, I can do that too. I can see how that worked for, we can do that too." And a lot of it, so that just builds on itself. It really works very well. And it has worked very well in this regard with the CRBs. How do you originally designed this process for coastal communities? Is that right? Tell me
yeah.
the history of this. How has the methodology adapted as you've moved it inland and more rural and expanded this program?
Yeah, when I first started at the Nature Conservancy, we were partnered up with NOAA, National Atmospheric Oceanic
Mhm.
Service, or no,
Right.
Administration, sorry.
Administered. Yeah.
I should know that. And we were very much in the modeling space. We thought we developed this mapping program that was designed to be a decision support tool. It's still available for folks to use. It's called Coastal Resilience. I was on point to develop it for Connecticut and New York, and it's got great stuff. It's got downscaled sea level rise information, the first downscaled sea level rise information for Connecticut, coupled with category 1 through 3 social vulnerability data, salt marsh advancement layer. We packed it full of great information in hopes that it would help inform decisions along the coast
Yeah.
of Connecticut and elsewhere. But we quickly realized that you can put wonderful stuff out there and have the best kind of interface and those kind of things. But unless you connect it to a process that helps municipalities, in this case, understand it and use it to come up with actions and develop a plan,
Mhm.
it's just kind of, it's just sort of out there. It's a wonderful tool. So, but if it's not connected to the process, it's sort of not a waste, but it's going to be unused. So I came up with, again, working with Noah back in the early days on developing a process that would help municipalities, go the distance identify their vulnerabilities, strengths, and develop actions and prioritize those actions. And so that was the origins of CRB. And since that time, the first one was actually in Bridgeport.
No.
And we're actually going back to Bridgeport this spring to repeat and update and recharge their CRB process. So that's going to be kind of fun. But since that time, we've worked with over 500 municipalities across 14 states. As I mentioned, about
Wow.
58 in Connecticut, and two academic universities, or yeah, Eastern Connecticut and Yale here in Connecticut, and just remarkable numbers. Like we had over 15,000 participants in the CRB workshops with about 100,000 hours invested in resilience. And as I mentioned, it's been kind of escalating lately because people are really, they recognize that they see the value in the process. And as you mentioned, there's a real informal, network out there, planner to planner, public works to public works,
Right.
church and faith-based communities. And once something works, it becomes really popular and desirable to apply it to your community. So that's the kind of the transition or the growth from just coastal to, inland. So the process is designed, as you mentioned at the onset, anywhere at any scale. So we can handle large communities, small communities, and Colebrook's like 750 or so.
Yeah.
Sherman. I love to talk about Sherman
Norman.
because there's like 75 people or something like that,
Mhm.
directly next to Danbury, which is one of our largest communities. So you've got these transitions quickly happening in Connecticut, which makes it really, really interesting. So large to small, inland to coastal, urban to rural, and also, disadvantaged to wealthy communities. Those are the kind of things that we designed the process to be flexible enough that it can actually accommodate and truly be useful anywhere at any scale.
Now, what is it? Just help me with some vocabulary here because I kept coming across the resilient gradients phrase.
Yeah.
The phrase resilient gradients. What is that? Just give us.
Yeah, that's just a goofy way that it's a way that to help organize my thought process around, how do you structure and how do you interpret the results we get from these
Right.
CRBs? Plus, it also helps us anticipate how to prepare for certain CRBs. So if I'm working with a large municipality like Bridgeport, it's coastal and it's urban and it's got a mix of disadvantaged and wealthy, probably leaning more towards the disadvantaged. I can prepare in a way that will respond to the needs of that community.
Okay.
So it's just a way of, you know, I got this background in academics, so this idea of gradients and all those kind of things kind of stems from that. But it's a way to kind of organize my thinking, and so I can help, the team be better prepared, the facilitation team, and just be more responsive. And then on the back end, it helps us kind of organize the results so that we can get them out there and hopefully inform others that are headed down this path as well.
The other stuff that I've read a great deal about in how you approach this is you use games to accelerate that creativity in the regional resilience area. How do interactive elements like game boards and playing cards help in this process? What are you doing there now?
Yeah. Yeah. So I used to use a lot of games. It can be, thinking through, the idea is to make planning fun. Yeah, that's the key, and it's often overlooked. And so I've used a lot of creative ways to gather information about strengths, challenges, and associated actions. These days, or since COVID, I've focused more on efficiency and effectiveness of gathering information alongside approaches, to building community strengths, etc. I do recall one example that definitely did work really well, and it involved about 28. It was a big kind of regional resilience effort, and it was the greater Milwaukee region out in Illinois, and there are about 28 communities. And it's a society or an area that's really, they follow sports, they live sports, they love sports. You're
Sure.
born you're born into it and you die, etc. And so we needed a way to help prioritize 12 highly important risks to that greater Milwaukee area. And so we developed playing cards and we had everybody place those playing cards on a football field. We had, the red zone was,
Mhm.
within the 20, half field and kind of line them up. And we use that just as a way to kind of it's a whole lot easier to ask people to lay cards on a table, on a game board, if you will, than it is, what's your top priorities and why? It's so sterile, it's so direct, it doesn't lend itself to any kind of connection or exchange as people are putting down their cards. And so, that worked really well in that
Mhm.
community because, this is a community that they go to bars and they play cards. They go to family events and they're really into it.
Sure.
So that worked pretty well. I've done a few other things using, building blocks and things like that. And, having individuals go out and come back to a group and, build the block, build the little architectural structure thing that was out in the hall, have people, the pairs go out there and bring them back, all this kind of building on this idea that you're in it together.
Mhm.
You're going to be more successful as a team versus an individual and use games, if you will, to help provide a sort of a tangible metaphor or an example of that actually happening. And you know, I call it community resilience building, but in actual fact, it's really community building. And my main goal in this whole thing is this kind of facilitator golden formula that I have. And if we provide people an opportunity to contribute and be heard,
Yeah.
uh, that'll equal stronger relationships and building trust. And that's ultimately what it's about, whether so even though we don't do games that much anymore, because we're trying to be, efficient and effective and keep things tight, we definitely put a lot of emphasis on sharing and exchange in hopes of creating strengthening relationships and building trust.
Yeah, and that's huge. And any kind of facilitated work, you can get people to be engaged, to be hands-on, to be involved in a communicative process, better than just much better than just being spoken to or spoken at. Here's a lecture. I'm going to come in and give you a lecture. And so much of what you do, what I have experienced is you're doing that facilitation work. You're getting the public works people to communicate with the community health people. These folks live in the same community and half the time don't even talk to one another. And it's really, I mean, because
Yeah.
it's not their fault. They're focused on their own work. They're focused on their jobs. And sometimes you really got to try to create these bridges for people to be able to communicate about, what are the priorities in the community and what can each of these groups bring to those priorities. The CRB workshops relies on a specific large, small, large team dynamic. Do I have that right? What does that mean in your world?
Yeah, yeah. So on the onset, I'm an armchair community psychologist. So if,
Yeah,
if there are
sure.
psychologists listening, I may be way off base here, but I've seen it. It works. But we bring people together. We start off in a large group. Everybody there. We have some spokespeople at the front. We normalize the process that they're about to go through, and everybody's aware, objectives, outcomes, that kind of stuff, roles, responsibility, and then we go into small groups. And the small groups will be 6 to 8 people, something like that, with a facilitator and a scribe. And they all go through the same process of identifying strengths, vulnerabilities, actions, and prioritizing those actions. And then everybody comes out of that
Right.
back into the large group and they present their priorities from each of the groups. And we use a color coding kind of exercise to, connect like-minded priorities across 2, 3, sometimes 4 small groups. And I'm always surprised, I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag, but it's no surprise to me that often the priorities are very similar across groups.
Right.
Because of course you live in the same community, you're struggling with the same things, you're enjoying the same strengths, etc. But what is remarkable to me is that invariably in my mic drop moment is when somebody, that's observing the color coded connection says, it is amazing to me how much we have in common. And that to me is, and my work is done here.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, to have somebody verbalize that we are one community, we're very much connected, and we totally agree on these priorities is such a huge step. And we're able to do that, you know, in a couple, and being able to do that in a couple hours is huge. We build this, you know, momentum and stuff coming out of it, and then we have a couple final kind of community building exercises to kind of put the icing on the cake as you go to close. But yeah, it's large group, small group, and then back into large group. And that final large group session after people have been in small groups is really super important. And it's a way for everybody to get a chance to say something. We created commons where everybody contributes to it. And you know, from public works to faith-based community to major employer to leadership, you name it, neighborhood association, they define who their community is and they invite them and they bring them there. So it really is a powerful way to, you know, that large group, small group, large group, it really works well. So if you do have like a proper psychologist or psychiatrist in your audience, definitely send some notes. I would love to see if there's any validity there, if they see anything. But
I just think it's fascinating. The dynamic is really interesting to watch unfold. Where what is fascinating is both the commonalities, because you're right, they're going to have commonalities because they're in the same community, but also the differences that will pop up, or the differences in emphasis or priority. Like somebody might all have flooding is on everybody's list, but it might be first on one list and third on another. And just to see how that flows, how it works out. I just think that's fascinating sometimes to see the similarities and the differences pop out of that. And it's a perfect way of getting at those similarities and differences. It's a great way to bring those out. Sure.
the process, the large group, or bringing the whole community together and having a community-based, derived, co-creating kind of approach, what it does is it eliminates. There are people walking around in every municipality with this is our priority one, two, three.
Right.
And what that does is it sure you can bring those into the conversation, but it's a community conversation, and the goal is to arrive at a list of priority actions that is agreed upon, you know, co-created. You know, I'm not using the word consensus because that's a huge word, but at least agreed upon as our path forward. So it diffuses the individual or the single and overweights the common,
Sure.
which is unusual for us Americans.
Well, and it's a methodology, but well, it's a methodology too by which you're getting people to become familiar and aware and comfortable with information they may not have had prior. So my example, you know, saying that the public works guys might have their own, you know, set of priorities. And now they're told by the community health people, no, these are our priorities over here. And they may be common, there may be some commonality between them, but they may be prioritized differently, et cetera. But both of these groups are now becoming very familiar with the other. Oh, I didn't realize that you had this in mind, or I didn't realize that this was something that was important to you. And we, you know, that makes a world of difference in a community trying to move in the same direction. Maybe not all at the same speed, maybe not all at the same time, but
Yeah.
everybody's trying to move
Yeah.
in a progressive manner, trying to progress together. It makes a world of difference. Let's take a break a second. We'll come right back and we'll continue. This has been great.
Sounds good.
We'll return to our program in just a moment. You've been listening to The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. Hey, if you're not yet a subscriber to Actions and Impact, the Sustainable CT newsletter, you could be missing out on some very important information to you, to your organization, and to your town. Do yourself a favor and subscribe today, and you can do that where? At sustainablect.org, of course. And while you're out there tripping the web fantastic, don't forget to join us on Facebook for some fun and interesting stuff. Guaranteed safe for children and pets. Come on, be our friend, won't you? At facebook.com/sustainablect. And yes, of course, we're LinkedIn. Search for Sustainable CT from your LinkedIn page. You'll find us right there, being all linked in and Media Social. And spring certification time is just around the corner. Oh, yes, it is. Our spring certification deadline is less than a month away. Yikes, April 14th. If you're working towards certification in your community, take a look through our archives. They include reports from communities that have successfully achieved sustainable CT certification. You can also visit the participating communities map to view each town's most recent certification report. See what worked for them as a guide to action in your own community. Help and resources are available for longer-term planning and future projects as well. Access opportunities for funding. Take advantage of our no-cost assistance programs, no cost. And connect with our Sustainable CT Fellowship Program to support local sustainability actions and certification guidance in the summer. If your municipality is not yet registered with Sustainable CT, or if your town is registered but has not yet considered working towards certification, please contact us. We'd be happy to speak with you, provide any information you may need, and discuss next steps. You can do this, and we can help. All right, let's get back to the program. Welcome back, everybody. We are talking to Dr. Adam Whelchel of the Nature Conservancy. He is talking to us about community resilience building. Really enjoy having a great conversation. The infrastructure is obviously a focus, and everybody's talking about bridges or water treatment or coastal areas, this sort of stuff. But you emphasize societal assets a lot. What do you mean by that? What are the most common social strengths you've seen communities display in a CRB workshop? Where does that come in?
Yeah, it's so important. We really look at three kind of planning buckets or categories in the process, including infrastructure. This was very intentional because I should have mentioned at the onset that CRB is coming out of the natural hazard mitigation world, where
Yeah,
oftentimes, every town needs to do one every 5 years to stay current and be in FEMA's good graces for funding. But usually those plans begin and end with things like, emergency access, better communication system, more equipment, infrastructure, bridges and roads, access and egress. And so it's very much infrastructure heavy and community input is usually like Tuesday night, 7 to 9.
yeah,
And so this
yeah,
process was really about trying to bring the community together and look at it, not only infrastructure, but societal needs, public health, as well as the environment, right? And kind of give them equal weight in terms of developing a comprehensive resilience plan for your community going
yeah,
forward. And so, some of the common societal things that emerge at these workshops include, and it's usually because there's groups that can really speak to that, right? Like faith-based community, health districts, really key NGOs like, Lions Club, Rotary, Knights of Columbus, Elks, VFW, that kind of stuff, that do amazing stuff and are in direct contact with the community and their needs.
yeah,
And so that gets folded into the conversation. And there's just some really powerful examples of actions that come out of that when you incorporate those kind of voices and that kind of experience. And there's a few that like stagger me, even though I've done this for a while. There's a few that like stick in my head, like that is amazing. And there was one where they had the food pantry at the church, accommodating the needs, priority needs, of people that live in the community eating, right? And they had paired that with a community wood bank to provide heating assistance to low income families.
yeah,
So you could pull up, get groceries, and get some wood to fuel you through the week. Those kind of things. Other things include like developing neighbor helping neighbor networks where people look out for people, especially older folks, in terms of groceries, prescriptions, and other kind of basic needs. There's other things like making sure that the libraries become these really crucial kind of hubs to, for outreach, education, charging phones, etc. So those are the kind of things that emerge. They're sometimes emergency response and recovery kind of related, like the library, which would fit into a traditional HMP, hazard mitigation plan process. But then there are some that are sort of out of the box, that wood bank, the neighbor helping neighbor, those kind of things. And a couple key things that aren't necessarily purely in the societal needs or public health, but are really critical from a social perspective in a community. They include, things like different departments, communicating and cooperating. You mentioned health districts and public works. Just that exchange is really super important because it's providing services that are satisfying the residents or societal needs.
Yeah,
And one that just really pops out that just stuck with me for a while is this idea of planning for transfer of institutional knowledge and wealth of knowledge about the municipality.
oh,
So it's this
okay,
kind of
yeah,
successional planning to
sure,
exchange that information and have an understanding of, who's on a response list, for example, who's not and why, and this kind of, making sure that you're from a public needs perspective within the hierarchy or the governance structure of a municipality that you're preparing for those needs. But the traditional ones are like community centers, classes for elders, rideshare programs, hot lunch programs, food
yeah,
pantry. Yeah, even things like multilingual translation services and forms in different languages, are really important to be considering in the context of a comprehensive resilience plan for your
sure.
community.
Especially as your community changes over time and who lives there and how diverse it is. And you're a big proponent of nature-based solutions, and I love that. How do you convince skeptical local leaders that a protected marsh or a forest is a more cost-effective investment than, say, I don't know, a concrete seawall? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I kind of I don't approach it that way, or I should say we don't approach it that way through the
yeah,
CRB process, but it's more, first of all, it's kind of changing the narrative or changing the language. If, if you're comfortable with it, let's start referring to it as natural infrastructure.
yeah,
Right. So it kind of creates this parity between what folks are used to talking about, sort of gray infrastructure, which, green infrastructure, natural infrastructure, or a green or gray infrastructure, concrete rebars,
I
bridges,
love that. Yeah, yeah,
so sort of changing that kind of narrative and then, you know, approaching it in such a way that these are all assets that are all part of your community and we need to maintain all these assets in order to realize a more resilient, sustainable, and equitable community.
and it's often cheaper to do, isn't
Yeah,
it?
but it's not, well, it can be. I mean, it's not appropriate everywhere.
Yeah, okay,
First and foremost, the classic one that gets brought up is, using non-structural or natural stuff along our coastline.
yeah.
But oftentimes it's too dynamic. There's too much of a tidal range. It's not appropriate to be thinking about a non-structural solution in every location.
Sure. Okay.
And the need for maintenance is it might be cheaper on the front end, but the intervals between maintenance is shorter. Therefore, you're going to be paying out probably over time. It's going to be more expensive, or at least equivalent. But where it is appropriate, it's wonderful. It's you get the ecosystem services or the nature-based solutions there. You get the aesthetics. It's a heck of a lot more beautiful to
Yeah,
most people,
yeah,
not everyone,
yeah,
to look at a wonderful, beautiful, healthy, productive, functioning salt marsh or riparian area than
yeah.
it is some sort of concrete wall, at least in my opinion.
Well, and that's a classic case. The towns seem to lack awareness sometimes of the benefits of good flood storage and local wetlands. And,
Right.
is there an educational component you have to bring to this where you're gently, diplomatically bringing people along to be aware of certain benefits that they might not otherwise be aware of? I'm trying to be really
Yeah.
kind here. I mean, the municipal people are well-intentioned very often, but sometimes they just don't have an awareness of the value of a floodplain. I mean, put it
Yeah.
clearly, right? It's not
Yeah.
just a piece of muck here. This is serving a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're pretty blessed here in the state of Connecticut. The value and the importance of natural resources and what they do and why they do it is is pretty. I don't have to convince too many people these
Good.
days.
Okay. Yeah.
And more than that, we've got a lot of folks like conservation commissions, inland wetlands, et cetera, or just residents that are vocal and active, a lot of land trusts, et cetera,
Yeah.
that have been telling that story for decades now, going way back, like 60s, 70s, 80s, and all the way up till today. So generally speaking, most people are pretty aware of the importance of paying attention, the benefits, and the need to protect, like things like local wetlands. They know they're beneficial for flood storage. So it's not a case of so much of making the case. It's more about incorporating those natural resources. So take flooding, for example, the issue of flooding in a given municipality, which comes up a lot, and pretty much any municipality that has a river system or is in a watershed, which is every one of them.
Right.
Um, but it's more about, okay, I recognize I know what to do from a traditional engineering perspective to solve this problem, but it's way too expensive and it would take a lot of time. Are there other ways or other solutions? Well, yeah, let's take a look at the natural resources we have, lakes, ponds, and adjacent to flooding areas. Okay, well, maybe we could use those to infiltrate and capture runoff to ameliorate the threats of flooding downstream. Great. Well, how do we do this? So it becomes more of a question of the timing and the
Okay.
sequence of interventions to help reduce flooding alongside helping people and structures that are impacted routinely or over and over again, move out of those areas. That's probably where the education and awareness is needed most. It's voluntary, but in actual fact, we can curtail future development, but we have a bit of a legacy or decisions that have been made in the past,
Yeah.
perhaps when it wasn't flooding so much. We've been around in Connecticut making those decisions about what goes where and when for what, 400 years or so? 1634 or
Yeah.
two, depending if you talk to Enfield or Wethersfield.
Right.
But we've been around a while making these decisions. We didn't used to develop like this, but the 40s and the 50s kind of came along, and so we have put structure in harm's way. But to answer your question or go back to it, there's not a lack of awareness about the benefits of flood storage, local wetlands, et cetera. It's more about how do we properly incorporate them in a nature-based solutions kind of context in a way that will benefit people,
Yeah.
but also not harm the ecosystem or the environment, and perhaps even enhance it or restore it to make sure that we're accommodating today's need, because tomorrow's need is going to be even more challenging.
Yeah.
So we need to be doing this kind of stuff now. And one of the ways that has come up a lot is when we design these gray infrastructures, bridges, culverts, etc. Oftentimes, not so much recently, but there probably is a need for greater awareness. We've been using design standards that are based on 24-hour rainstorms, etc. back in the 1970s. So, 40, 50 years later, with the
Yeah.
increased precipitation rainstorms that we get, it's not built in a way that's going to handle today's storms.
Right.
So if you're remodeling, retrofitting now, you want to be using precipitation rates, et cetera, that are current, not 1970s. That'll help us keep it out of trouble.
Yeah.
It'll spend less money, and we only have to pay once, at least in this century.
Well, let me, this is a little, I was just thinking, do you run into the issue of money? I mean, we all want to do the right thing and we want to be able to do what is necessary to protect the lives and property of, of our communities. And sometimes it just feels so outrageously expensive. And to some degree, we're trying to share the burden a little bit so that we're looking for ways to have the state underwrite some of these things in community. We're talking about some tiny towns that don't have the tax base to be able to do a lot of stuff. You talk about Bridgeport Bridgeport is facing some huge issues. For obvious reasons, being on the coast the way it is, but again, doesn't have the tax base to be able to address the large challenges that are ahead due to climate change. Do you run into that? I guess I'm just curious. Do you run into that kind of that defense from municipalities or people coming up kind of exasperated, say, I love all this. I love we're having this conversation. These are great ideas. We don't have the money for it.
Yeah, it comes up quite a bit. It's especially last year and this year where there was a great deal of uncertainty about the usual regular streams of federal
Sure.
or pass-through money through state, just given the, where we're at. Yeah, but there's kind of a sequence of change that I see in municipalities in terms of the types of actions that they come up with. There's kind of a, recognition. There's the formation of some sort of structure, like a working group, like a flood and erosion control board. A municipality want, a resilience committee, or, sustainable CT working group, something like that
Hmm.
will be set up. That usually leads to some sort of policy change. Like a great example is low impact development requirements, or minimizing runoff from building sites, or something related to MS4 stormwater type stuff.
Sure.
So you kind of have this formation. Usually there's and then policies one that bridges out of that. There's education and outreach that goes kind of along with that. And then you get into planning, and then you get projects. So the projects are the big ticket items, but there's a lot of work communities can do to build up, flex the muscles, build the muscles through formations of groups, modifying policy that will curtail the future need for those big ticket items,
Yeah. Okay.
sort of adapt and stop it now kind of thing. We
Yeah.
already have a huge expense. The capacity building, the planning, and then eventually the project. So there's a ton of work that municipalities can do that is relatively inexpensive compared with those big ticket items. One of the key things that always comes up and is, and as you mentioned, it can be particularly challenging for smaller municipalities that are just trying to keep their head above water and continue to offer services, and really relying on volunteerism to make all that happen, which is sort of not sustainable given the aging demographics in Connecticut.
Right.
But yeah, that's why groups like our COGS, our Council of Governments, become really important. They can help aggregate or roll up proposals to get money for infrastructure and things like that to pay for those big ticket items. The state maintains a 5 or 10 year list on infrastructure for state roads that might, go through your municipality, and people are pretty aware of that and, connected with that. But you're right, there's never going to be enough money to get us
There's
out of
never enough money.
this.
Yeah.
There's never going to be enough money, but there are things we can do that can strengthen our community to put us in a better place. Develop a plan. I remember at one workshop, it was in Guilford, and a prominent politician got up and said, those with a plan are going to be first in line. And
Yeah.
I really believe that, it's,
Sure.
and funding favors those with a plan.
Yeah.
So I do see a lot of communities coming, one of the actions they come out of their CRB with is, hire a grant writer, or, a part-time grant writer, or shift internal capacity to provide grant writing capabilities,
Yeah.
because there's that need. And even some communities are developing resilience funds. The big cost is education and staff, but if there's anything left, trying to carve out a little bit of a resilience fund to put some match funding, or put something away that will eventually get to those big
Yeah.
ticket items. But as I mentioned, make sure if you're going to spend the money, make sure you're designing for the future. If you're able to, I know there's constraints in terms of the physical built environment around some of these bridges, et cetera. But if you can be planning for the big storm in like 2050 or something like
Right.
that. That's too far
Everybody's
out, but
Yeah, everybody's caught
yeah,
fighting the last war, trying to
yeah,
fix something that that happened I agree with you, without actually looking ahead and see what actually the need is going to be in 5, 10, 20 years. That's true. Absolutely. You've had probably hundreds of success stories, maybe thousands. I don't know. Do you have a favorite one that sticks out for you in your head about the profound impact or transformed a community through something in the community resilience workshop process? I mean, you must have a few favorites out there.
I just had a chance to work with my hometown, Colebrook, as well as Sharon up in the northwest corner, and it was so interesting to see a community that I grew up in. I was a resident of, and you hardly think you're sort of hardly aware of the structure of who does what and how it actually happens, and oh, what is it? It kind of forces you to ask that question, what is a municipality
Hmm.
and what do they do? And it was just a great reminder to me as to the commitment, the dedication of both volunteers and paid or appointed folks that get stuff done and make a town what it is and take care of what it is each and every day. So that's probably the I'm sort of partial because it was my hometown, but that one sticks in my mind.
Yeah.
It's been I've had the privilege of working with a couple over time, like Fairfield, twice or three times, every 5 years. So that's been really interesting to see the change. This was our priority list in 2011, and we were able to get this, and that done. And now we have a fresh list 5 years later.
Right. Sure.
So I really, really respect and appreciate where the CRB is most successful is where there's a community that is just waiting for something to unlock it. They've got everything, they've got willingness, they're ready, they have fantastic people committed, and they just need something to unlock them, and that's where it's most successful.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Adam, we are out of time, and that's a great way to leave this, to unlocking the potential of the communities we're working with. And we certainly hope you continue to do that for a very long time. We're having really effective with the towns that work with us, that they're able to work with you. So thank you for that. And thank you for this. Thank you for joining me here today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. This program was written, recorded, edited, and produced by me. As always, it is copyrighted by Sustainable CT. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our sponsor, the Common Sense Fund. Thanks to our guest, Adam Whelchel, for everything he does to make Connecticut and our world a better place. And thanks to everyone for taking local actions that have a statewide impact.